Hello. In this chapter, I want to explore how human beings have understood reality with spiritual ideas through history, and how not only the ideas have evolved, but the things they're trying to understand, the nature of reality itself, has evolved. And the place to start is with prehistory, the early shamanic cultures, as best as we can understand what they were like, which seem to be what gets called animistic. They view reality as being run by something behind the scenes, as we still do, of course. My idea of passivity systems, or the laws of nature, are that. But they see them as spirits, which are making the plants grow and governing all the natural processes. And this seems a perfectly natural way to understand the nature of reality if you've got very few ideas. And this is tricky to get, very hard really, which is that our ancestors didn't have all the ideas we have. Those differentiations, those categories we now have, they didn't have those categories. They had to be created. So the initial categories are very few ideas. And one of the differentiations that hasn't been made at this early point is between intention and causality. The difference between an object just doing something and a conscious being intending something. Interestingly, Piaget, the psychologist, looking at child development, points out that children up to the age of 5 can't make that differentiation. They think the car is alive. They think everything is alive. That's the state of animism. I'm not saying our ancestors were like children. Not at all. They were pretty hardy and able to survive in conditions I wouldn't survive in, for sure. But they hadn't made that differentiation yet. So they would see their own intentionality to do things in the human world and think there must be something similar going on with the natural world. They're using the ideas available to them. So that there's basic ideas like father and mother, for instance. Therefore, the earth is understandable as like a mother, and the sky or the heavens like a father. They're surrounded by animals, so they become fundamental ideas with which they can understand how nature works, and also how they, as human beings, work, so that animals become totems. They represent qualities, courage, guile, wisdom, which is seen in that particular animal's behavior. Now, what's happening here is, I suggest, is they are psi-sensing reality. They're psi-sensing passivity systems and thinking of them, ideating them as spirits. They're psi-sensing the past generally, say of a place. Now, the place is not an integrated passivity system, but it has a past. It's a whole ecology of passivity systems. But you can psi-sense its past, so you can go, oh, this place is special. It's got a particular quality to it. And our shamanic ancestors are doing that. This particular place geographically is got this particular energy, this particular past, this particular feeling, and they're psi-sensing it. And then they're putting that in terms of, well, there's a spirit to this place. I don't think that's quite right, but they're psi-sensing something which is there with the ideas they have available to them. Now, by the time you hit the ancient world, say 3000 BCE, that is transformed. Well, human culture has transformed. It's no longer nomadic hunter and gatherer tribes, for instance. Now you've got settled, large societies with a ruling class. And what's going to come with that is the transformation of the ideas with which human beings are psi-sensing how the natural world works become the idea that there's gods and goddesses who are modelled on human ruling class. There's a family. Of course, there must be families. They must have relations, and they are capricious and sometimes kind, sometimes unkind, like nature itself, the thing they're trying to sense. And they represent, as before, the forces of nature, but also things within human beings, like the quality of justice. And as these ideas are taking shape, the idea of justice, the way of understanding it or sensing the idea becomes to represent it by a goddess, in this case often, or the god of war or the god of music, so that people can gravitate towards the area of culture that they are interested in and want to serve, and they serve that god, Apollo, if you're into music, for instance, or Athena, if you're into wisdom. This is in Greece. But it's universal. Now, what's interesting is that you go back a little bit further to ancient Egypt, and you see the transition between the animal totems and it becoming humanized, so that you have gods with animal heads but human bodies. And that's the transition in the way that we're conceiving of the ideas that we're sensing reality with. Then we hit classical antiquity, around 500 BCE, let's say. And you get something really significant. In fact, you get three really significant things. Surface. Now, all of these things probably were happening before, in many cases almost certainly, but at some points in history it becomes obvious. And here it's becoming obvious. And the first one is human beings develop the idea of an idea. Now, that's basic for us. But there was a time when human beings didn't have the idea of an idea. They just had ideas. Mostly we have ideas unconsciously. We don't know we have them. We have to reflect to find our ideas. What are the ideas I'm operating with here? Most of them, we ideate unconsciously. We're conscious of what we ideate. We have to reflect to make conscious our ideas. Well, there was certainly a time when human beings didn't do that. And then you get the clear arising of the idea. And you can see that with the development of philosophy in Greece, for example, and the figure of Socrates, where he is not looking at justice as in, let's discuss this goddess figure. He's like, what's the idea? What do we mean by that? What is and isn't justice? Now, he's still got the gods and goddesses, but it's moved now towards the idea. And Plato, his student, is going to develop a whole theory of ideas, because it's the recognition of, oh, look, here's a horse, here's another horse. They're very different, but they're both horses. Why? What makes them both horses? And what Plato's going to suggest is, oh, there must be this transcendental idea of the perfect horse, and these are poor representations of it, because we've fallen into this copy of the pure ideas. Now, I would say that's completely the wrong way around, and from a modern perspective, you go, no, the nature of reality is diverse. There's lots of things which we would call horse, and the idea is a category with which we've pulled them all together and gone, oh, that's of one type. But the key thing here is ideas. Now, once that's happened, once you've realized you're dealing with categories, ideas, it's only a matter of time before the idea of representing ideas by gods is going to be abandoned. That's redundant. The other big thing that happens around this time is that human beings begin to sense what I call the formless field of being. So you get clearly in Buddhism, for example, the recognition, oh, the essence of all the form is formless. It's empty. This is a big moment. Human beings are tuning into the essential ground of reality, and it's the isness. It's a formless field of being. You find in the Upanishads around this time in India the first mention of meditation. They're learning to focus. It's quite a thing to focus on that and go, ooh, I can really fill my attention with emptiness. And that's extraordinary. In China, get something slightly different but comparable with the Tao and the Day, where the Tao is this flow of becoming, but in itself is mystery, and it's taking on all of these qualities, which is the Te. And then the third thing, which is really significant around this same time, is we see the emergence of the Supersoul, what I call the Supersoul, or the unividual communion, this vast, loving superintelligence. Now, human beings have recognized that everything's one a long time before. You can go back to ancient Egypt or the Vedas, 1500 BCE. There's a recognition that it's one and it's many. But what starts emerging now is something new. So you see in the Upanishads, it takes the oneness of the Vedas and it becomes the great mind of Brahman. Or Xenophanes in Greece dismisses all of the gods and goes, there's an all mind. In Buddhism, you get the idea of the luminous mind. And in the Jewish tradition, you get the movement from, oh, Yahweh is a god amongst other gods and he's jealous, and there's many, many different gods, but this is the chosen one for our people. They get this huge movement to monotheism. There is one God which is for everyone. It's universal. There's just one God. So this is a very significant movement, and you get this superintelligence is good and loving, and that's new. In the ancient world, there's no one reports the experience of some benevolent power taking care of them. The gods, like nature, are capricious and dangerous, and you need to serve them or bargain with them or give them things to get things back and all of that. But now, around this time, you see in Christianity, God is loving. God is loving. Wow, that's new. In Mahayana Buddhism, also around 2,000 years ago, this development of Buddhism, you get the idea of metta, loving kindness, being inherent to the luminous mind. So that, the word God is not related to good. People often think it is. It isn't. But now, for the first time, this one God, this big mind, as it will become called in the Zen tradition, Buddha nature, is good. So that in the Hermetic tradition, which is arising, being written down, the Hermetic writings at this same time, and Neoplatonists like Plotinus, you're going to get the one is the good. So something quite different has emerged, and that's what I want to explore. The other thing which happens around this time is you get the emergence of the love light in the death experience. So if you go back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, 1500 BCE, there's a lot of stuff about what happens when you die, but no mention at all of there being a loving light and all of that. But by the 8th century, with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there it is, absolutely central. This luminous mind, the love light, and just as it is for people who have NDEs today. Now, what I'm suggesting is the reason that people hadn't mentioned this before wasn't because it already existed and they hadn't just discovered it, is because it's actually coming into existence. So this is a shift. So when human beings are in the animistic stage, they're psi-sensing what is actually there, the passivity systems that run nature, the past, and they're psi-sensing it as best they can. And then when they start representing human qualities, those are evolving. The idea of justice is evolving, and they're able to negotiate the idea by giving it a mythological representation and that just means with anthropomorphic ideas. So justice is a woman. It's a way of relating to the idea. But that idea is evolving. Then with the other step that I've talked about with the psi-sensing of the formlessness, that's always been there. And it's being discovered for the first time because it's a very emergent thing to be able to take attention and focus on the formless ground of being. And what's arising from that, I want to suggest, is an integrated supersoul. So that this is a whole new thing. And it's surfacing around this time. Probably been developing for a while. So in the universe generally, things form collectives. They exist together. In the physical world, you get lots of collectives. And with single-celled organisms, you get lots of collectives. And then with herds of animals, collectives, families. But what happens is that certain collectives can integrate into becoming a super system. So single cells integrated to form multicellular organisms. So that's now not just a collective of single cells, it's a super system. And what I've been exploring is something similar happened with psyches, with souls, and still is happening. So that throughout the whole of the evolutionary process of becoming, there's differentiation and integration into a high-level system. And that's happened not just with physics and biology, but also with the psyche or the soul. And to use a rather crass analogy, you take two computers and you bind them together, you got double the power. It's exponential. So that what's happening to create a superintelligence is starts with very few souls forming a bigger system, but as they integrate, then it can really take off. And just like cells come and go from the bigger system, which continues, so souls can come and go through the process of reincarnation, for example, from the super system. But the super system is growing, it's emerging, it's evolving, and human beings are beginning to sense that. However, people can only understand the nature of reality with the ideas they have. They don't know this is happening. Even the people who are coming into this unividual communion, I suggest, they don't know that they're doing that any more than a cell knows it's forming a multicellular organism. It's just doing its own thing on its own level. It has to learn to understand what the nature of this supersoul, which it's now integrated into, or beginning to become integrated, even if only temporarily becoming integrated into. And so what you see is people doing their best to understand with the ideas they've got. So one of the ideas we've got is the monotheistic idea. There's one God, which has emerged. Now, I think these ideas that I discussed, of monotheism, the luminous mind, these are ways of understanding the emerging supersoul. But there's going to be confusion in there, and you certainly see it with monotheism, so that you've got the idea of a God. Well, first of all, it's a God amongst many gods, and then it's the boss God, and then all the other gods disappear, and there's just one God. It kind of mirrors what's happening again in society. You can see that with the triumph of the emperor over the oligarchs in Rome. There's not a whole group of them now, there's just one guy. He's running the show, and they get the idea of there's one God running the show. But this is a God modelled on the old idea of a God. It's not actually an understanding of the nature of the supersoul, which is something quite different. This is a Lord. He literally prayed to it, dear Lord, because it's the same idea that you're worshipping and bowing down to this one great ruler of the universe who's like the emperor. But that's not what the supersoul is. That's the confusion of the supersoul with an old idea, which is carrying the positivity, the remnants of the previous period of understanding everything as capricious gods and goddesses. But you see, particularly with Christianity, which is an area I know the best because I've written so many books on early Christian Gnosticism. It's also happening elsewhere, but let me focus in on this. You can see the Christian Gnostics, who I suggest are the people that create Christianity. That's a whole nother subject. You can look at my books, The Jesus Mysteries and Jesus and the Lost Goddess, if you want to understand that. But here, that doesn't matter so much. Here, what I want to suggest is that they're wrestling with experiencing this loving, good supersoul, where two or more are gathered together. Ooh, there it is. Wow. And this old Jewish God Yahweh. Now, what's interesting to me is they can't just go, well, Yahweh doesn't exist. There's this. That's the God of Yahweh that says, go into the promised land and kill every breathing thing. He's not a God of love. This is a vicious God of tribalism. Starts as a thunder god. But they can't do that. They can't just go, it doesn't exist. They're unable to do that, like later atheists have been able to do. At that point, what they do is they have to find a new way of making sense of this. And so what they do is they go, well, look, Yahweh's not the great God that runs the universe. Yahweh is a lesser entity. And the God that is the God of Christianity, which is the God of love, is transcendent to all of that. Now, I think they're right in what they're trying to do, and they're doing their best with the ideas they've got, but there's an historical confusion between what I would call the ground and the sky, to use that metaphor. And it's because they don't have the evolutionary idea, which we have now. And we can see that, there is a natural assumption when you experience this big mind to go, this is where the universe has come from. It's the ground. So the ground isn't the emptiness discovered by the Buddhists, it's the fullness, it's the big mind. And what I'm suggesting, with the advantage of 100 years of understanding that the universe is a process of becoming, an evolutionary process, is that that's wrong. The Buddhists are right. The ground is empty. It's the possibility to become anything, but it's not anything. And the big mind, the loving superintelligence, is the most emergent level, which is really coming into existence around this time, which is why I think Christianity, by the way, was so influential, especially in the West, because it was something utterly new, amazing, in reality, not just as an idea. So that if you come into a state of oneness, you commune with the big mind, but God isn't the oneness. God is what happens when you come into the oneness. When you come into the oneness, you commune with everything, and that means you integrate, or begin to, into this super system. It's like if you are aware of the oneness, you don't see in the undifferentiated, there's no love and beauty and all the rest of it. The love and the beauty and all those very emergent qualities are arising because you're entering the unividual communion, which is the most emergent level. So that it's not like I've said before, it's not like there's a God, an intelligent design running, intelligence creating and running the universe. It's the evolution of intelligence leading to the evolution of a superintelligence, which is a new level of the universal evolutionary tree. It's just that our ancestors didn't know any of this. So the spiritual traditions have got it the wrong way around. We're not awakening back to where it's all come from, the ground, which is the big mind. It's not a matter of undoing everything to get back. It's the opposite. We're spiritually awakening to a more emergent level, which is arising. It's evolving. And there's a fundamental idea here, a fundamental mistake, which I will touch on later in more detail, which I call essentialism, which is a very common idea that what's there at the beginning, let's say, that's what's really real. And one of the things people really don't like about the idea that there's a formless ground of being, albeit it's the potential to become anything, is it sounds like what's essentially real is a kind of a nothing. And you get the same thing with physics. What's essentially real is the lowest common denominator of reality. Everything else is an epiphenomena, a thing which has arisen from it. Whereas the emergent idea is that's not true at all. What's there at the beginning is just the simplest thing. It's all real. And now what's real is not just our human nature and the psyche, but the super psyche. That's the most emergent reality. So it's emergentist, not essentialist. Okay, let's have a little look about what I've been trying to convey in this chapter. I'm saying, look, our ancestors have tried to understand the nature of reality. They've tried to psi-sense passivity systems and called them spirits, or they've psi-sensed a particular place in its past and imagined a spirit of the place. And they've looked at forces of nature and seen them as gods. They've used animals as totems to represent, as ideas to represent things that they are seeing in the world. And then cultural ideas like justice and war and music. And then there's been a jump of psi-sensing, so that they've been able to psi-sense the ground of being, which is formless. And as people have come into that recognition and experienced that fundamental oneness of being, they've integrated into a super system, and we see the emergence of the idea that there's a big mind, and there is. But that big mind, that supersoul, is easily confused with the old ideas. So that old idea of God as, first of all, one amongst many, and then the only one who runs the whole show, that idea of God becomes conflated with the emerging supersoul, and we misunderstand its nature. We see it that it's at the beginning when it's not. It's actually the most emergent level of the process of becoming, of the universal evolutionary tree. So, but the forces of nature actually exist. But we needed to understand them in a new way. They're not gods or spirits. But that was interesting. Got us there. The individual supersystem, it really exists. But now we need to understand it in a new way. It's not a big God in that way. Using the word God, I often do it because it carries a certain gravitas of the experiential nature of touching something greater. But we need to clearly see that it's not like the old gods. And it's interesting to me, if you go back, say, into the Jewish tradition, then you'll see that God, Yahweh, to begin with, and this is universal too, is imagined as a big man. The gods are big human beings. That can make sense to the ancient mind. They have bodies and do things. And then that developed into the idea that God is a big mind. And that, I think, is right. That God isn't a big man, but it is a big mind. It is a big psyche. God is just like your body is an integrated multicellular system, that super system, God is an integrated multi-mind system. And as we understand that, it changes everything. So if you go back to the shamanic idea of animism, you see bargaining. Oh, we have to do this, so they give us that. We give them stuff. It reaches its whole, most grotesque level with human sacrifice and God knows what, in order to get what you need, the weather you need, the fertility you need. And that will become worship, like worshipping the emperor. Give him what he needs. Oh, you're the one, you're the one, you're the Lord, you're the Lord. And that becomes more benign with the idea of the monotheistic good God of love, and you get the idea of serving. You get this lovely thing in Christianity, don't you, of, serve the poor. Anyone who serves the least is serving that God. Beautiful. And then I think it makes another twist with what I'm suggesting, which is closer to collaborating. that we're all part of it, and our role in life is to contribute ourselves to this emerging super system, this divine superintelligence, this loving, beautiful presence that we can experience and be part of now, and especially when we die, I think. So, what I've hoped to convey in this very quick movement through a lot of history where a lot has happened is to just give an idea that our spiritual sensibilities are developing as our ideas become better. And then the very reality we're describing has changed. So, as I mentioned, for the Egyptian Book of the Dead, there was no love light for them to describe. But by the time of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, quite a long time afterwards, there was. And now they could describe it. And that process hasn't stopped. We're doing it now, and what I'm suggesting in this pod book is the best way of understanding it today that I've found so far. In the next chapter, I want to explore suffering. We all experience it. What is it? And what can we do about it?